Welcome to our podcast, The Words That Make Us.
Consider this time with us as your excuse to take a break from everything.
Every episode, we choose a word that makes us think, wonder, or dream. We read a range of texts that explore different aspects of this word.
And we let our thoughts wander. We hope that yours will too. So grab your favourite tea.
Or a beer.
And join me, Rama Shah.
And me, Tony Bailey. Let's go!
So, today's episode is about failure. All smiles, I know what it takes to fool this town. I'll do it till the sun goes down. And all through the night time, I'll tell you what you want to hear. Leave my sunglasses on while I shed a tear. It's never the right time. I put my armor on, show you how strong I am. I'm unstoppable. I'm a Porsche with no brakes. I'm invincible. Yeah, I win every single game. I'm so powerful. I don't need batteries to play. I'm so confident.
Hang on a minute. You can't read that. You were supposed to sing it.
No. I'm a failed singer. I'm sorry.
Hale, there is no room for failure on this podcast. Otherwise, we won't be unstoppable.
Well, we shall see about that. So, thinking about failure, what is your definition of failure?
I'm always thinking about failure.
No.
My definition of failure, I really hate the word. I was a little bit worried when we decided to do failure because I thought this could really open up a can of worms. Mm-hmm. But I really don't like the word. Failure, for me, depends on the context that we're using it. But I know dictionary definition is kind of like... it's a strange word because it's not something, it's a lack of something.
Yeah.
So for me, failure means the lack of the outcome that you wanted, the lack of a success, or the lack of a result. Or if you're talking about not human beings, you could be talking about failure just being, the lack of the intended result.
Yeah, like an engine failed to start or something.
So due to signal failure at Clapham Junction.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, though, I don't know what you think about it, but when I use the word failure to talk about signal failure, there's a network failure, so there's no internet at the moment. It doesn't cause any emotional sort of response. But the minute I think about failure as a personal thing, like you saying to me, well, that last podcast was a complete failure because of what you said, for example.
Yeah.
Then the word really hurts.
Yeah, it's interesting how with machines, it's a very, very scientific word almost. You know, it's just a matter of fact. You know, something failed. It did not work. That's fine. We move on. We find a way around it. We fix it. But if it's something that has to do with a human, I mean, I would never say that to anybody. I wouldn't say that to a student, to a child of mine.
It's kind of like the worst. Could you imagine that? And I do say sometimes to my students, as hopefully as a way of encouraging them, if you don't sort this out, you are going to fail. Yeah. Like that's the ultimate. But then to say to a child, or in fact to anybody, you're a complete failure.
Yeah, I think...
Gosh, how more worthless could you make somebody feel by
Exactly. I think worthless is the word. It's like it really breaks you and it breaks your sense of self. And I think when you say to someone you're going to fail a subject, I think you're kind of not making it so personal. It's kind of like you're failing in an exam. It's not as bad as saying to someone, you have failed me. If I say to someone or somebody, oh my God, if somebody says to me, you have failed me. If a student comes to me at the end of the year or something and says, Ms. Shah, by the way, you have failed us, I think I would be devastated.
Yeah, that's horrible, isn't it? That's actually a little bit similar to the way that there's two sorts of failure I see in my students as well. Sort of major failure and little failure. No, not, no, some of them pass, honestly. There's failure where I don't see it as a problem. There's students who work really hard and they really try hard and they're really searching for understanding, but they still haven't quite got it yet. Especially when you're teaching a subject like maths.
Yes.
There's some big concepts.
Yeah.
So people do fail to get things right. And I really have sympathy for them. And, I'm really trying to encourage them because at least they're trying hard.
Yeah.
And then I have failure where, frankly, it's what the student deserves because the failure isn't to do with the lack of trying or the lack of understanding. It's because they can't be bothered or because they haven't followed the instructions you've given.
Yeah,
so,
they haven't listened. Yeah. I think this is something where it's like, if you don't try at all, then you're not going to fail by definition. If you don't try, you don't fail, But I think you have to put yourself out there sometime and say, I am going to be out there, bare myself, and receive all the slings and arrows. And if I succeed, I succeed. And if I fail, at least I've tried.
That philosophy of if you don't try at all, then you'll never fail is all well and good. But unfortunately in life, we are constantly up against challenges where we are going to be deemed to have succeeded or failed.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how you could live out that philosophy of I'm never going to try and then I haven't failed.
I suppose
because then you will fail because failure isn't measured just by your own standards. It's measured by the world around you.
That's a good point. I think sometimes what I'm trying to say is that sometimes you just stay in your comfort zone. You don't try. You just content yourself with the lowest of the low of everything. You lead a very, very, what's the word? I don't want to say average because there's nothing wrong with average, but something that it does not meet your potential at all. And you just say, okay.
Sounds like almost like a definition of depression to me.
Kinda, actually. Yeah. It's kind of like, like
of ikigai. What are we going back to that podcast? It does sound a little bit like that.
Maybe if you have no ikigai, that is true. Yes, if you're feeling that, I don't want to get up and try, I'm happy to just do whatever it is that is easy, it doesn't take much effort. And also, I think the worst thing is that when we don't try because we are worried what would happen to us if we failed or what would happen if we succeeded. Sometimes we really worry that if I succeed, who am I? Then I have to change my whole life and I have to start working harder. And
so there are any parts of your life where a fear of failure actually inhibits what you do?
I think it used to be my thing in relationships, actually, where I was like, go for somebody that is, quote unquote, below me, somebody who's like, it's
oh my goodness.
And you're like,
did you used to have like a notebook
if I lower my standards
where you like listed the top 10 boys? And like, come on, you can be honest with me, like 1 to 10. But then because of your fear of failure, you only went with somebody who was like 5 or 6 rather than number 1.
No, it was just I think I see people do that and I might have thought it at some point, but actually the opposite is true. I think my standards are way, way too hard and that sometimes can lead to failure as well. It's like if you have very unrealistic expectations or if you have no expectations at all, you're going to fail either way. How about you?
Sorry, this discussion's just brought back some memories of my university life. I remember a girl there. I can't say her name just in case she's listening. But I remember, I thought she was quite nice. She was South African. Not that that's hopefully nothing to do with it. But anyway, she was South African and blonde.
Yeah.
And I thought she was quite nice. I didn't think I was in the running or anything. But I remember her saying to me once, "Oh, Tony, you're a really nice guy. You're currently my number 3.
Oh my God.
Like, this wasn't like 2 7-year-olds like in the playground, but this was like a 20-year-old woman saying to me that I was currently her number 3. I was like, is that a success or failure?
Oh my God.
At least I made it into the top 3.
You did. That's a bronze medal right there.
Yeah, but bronze medal isn't. That's failure in many people's books. Is that? And that's a failure, isn't it?
Actually, that's funny. There's a bit of a tangent here, but I can't not bring it up. I once read a study. They said that the bronze, the one who earned the bronze, is actually a lot happier than the one who earned the silver.
Yeah.
Do you know why?
Well, you could probably further. You got something, but you weren't that close that it mattered. Something like that.
Something like this. It's like the one who got the silver is always comparing himself or herself to the one who won, and they're like, "I was so close to winning," so they're not happy.
Yeah.
And the one who got the bronze is like, "I made it into the top 3," and that is definitely fantastic.
Yeah.
So come on, I would say that's a win.
A win.
Yeah, but it's insane how some people have like no self-awareness that they can say something like that.
Yeah. Now, for me, I honestly, I had no fear of failure at all until the perfect storm happened in my life, where there was a lot of things that took me by surprise at the same time that all appeared to fail at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
So the cumulative effect of a lot of failures has really made me hypersensitive to failure.
Yeah, because you know what they say, when it rains, it pours, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, that's such a good phrase. It really, really sums it up. So it's like for the first time in my life, I feel like there's a whole roster of things now that I will not do simply because the consequences of my previous failure are too hard to contemplate having to deal with again.
Yeah, but that makes me sad in a way, because you're a very capable, very accomplished person, and you should not be scared of trying. I mean, you should always put yourself out there. This actually reminds me of something that Brene Brown once said. Do you know Brene Brown?
I do know Brene Brown, yeah.
I've read...
Well, not personally, we've never met, but I have seen
Maybe you were in her list, number 3 on her list or something?
There's a couple of really good TED Talks
yes.
from Brene Brown, yeah.
Yeah. So she says in one of her books, I can't remember the name of the book, but anyway, she says, "I want to be in the arena. I want to be brave with my life. And when we make the choice to dare greatly, we sign up to get our asses kicked. We can choose courage or we can choose comfort, but we can't have both. Not at the same time." I really like that, because I would always, as you established earlier, I worry too much what people think of me. But recently I've been able to... So I submitted a story to a contest the other day. And
did you fail?
I failed. I did fail. But I was so proud of the story that I actually posted it on my Facebook page before I knew whether it was going to win or fail, you know? Bearing myself there and putting myself out to people, knowing that I did not win, you know?
Yeah.
And I was really proud of myself, because I was like, because Brene Brown is mostly interested in vulnerability, in how we have to be vulnerable. Otherwise, if we keep protecting ourselves, we will never dare greatly, like she said. Mm-hmm. And so we are bound, that is one definition of failure. And so I was like, I'm really proud of this. I'm going to post it. Not everybody can win. Even the greatest stories will not always win. And so I was like, I'm putting it out there. And
well, here's a point linked to that then that I think I find helpful. That I think when you define or think about failure, you can think about failure in your own eyes and in the eyes of others. Mm-hmm. So if I was entering a songwriting competition and I didn't win, A, I wouldn't be surprised, and B, I wouldn't be so worried, because it's based on what other people think about my songs, and they would be judging my songs against the songs of lots of other people, really talented people. So it's not really about me, is it? The success or failure of what I've done is based on their perception of it and how they value it compared to other things. So I shouldn't be taking the burden of their judgment on my shoulders, because it's not about me, right?
I love that.
Whereas if I write a song and it sucks, then I'm really going to hurt personally until I've fixed it, because that's about my judgment. So there's nothing worse than spending hours on something, playing it back, and it's like, this just wasn't what
What I had in mind.
What I had in mind, which is really what the definition of failure is, isn't it? The absence of the result that was intended.
Yeah, not meeting the standard that you wanted.
So I failed. I was not able to do what I set out to do. And because that's my judgment of myself, then that failure feels like a real one.
Yeah, it's a tricky one because they say that you're always your worst enemy or your worst critic, because it could be that somebody will look at it and enjoy it, but because you have the highest standards or because it didn't match exactly what you had in mind, and then you're deeming it as a failure. And so sometimes getting perspective is also very important with failure, right? It's all a matter of perspective.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because in that perspective where, no, it's terrible, I hate it, and somebody else listens to it, I said, well, no, it's really good.
Yeah.
An external perspective helps to pull it the other way. But I think, again, different personalities, really. Some people spend a lot of time mulling over or in their head telling themselves how great they are. And about, recalling all their successes. Yeah. Telling the world how good they are.
Narcissists come to mind.
Yeah. Some people dwell so long on their failures and mistakes, and that's all they ever seem to have there left to talk about. I know that as a person who's on failed marriage number 2, so two divorces, you can become so engrossed in your own failure.
Yeah.
All the time, all you're doing is analysing the reasons for it and what you could have done differently. And I think that sort of failure is really difficult. Human failure, relationship failure, family breakdowns, family failures are so difficult because unlike mechanical failure that can be fixed or improved, often once that failure in a human situation has happened, it is irreplaceable or irreparable.
I think it's a very tricky one because, sometimes we deem something a failure when it's actually not really a failure. I mean, you got some lovely kids out of that marriage, those marriages.
You haven't met my kids.
Sorry if you're listening. You love them.
I love them, really.
And you had some great moments, in there. It doesn't mean, just because it didn't last, it doesn't mean that it wasn't legitimate or it wasn't a good thing. It's just
I think that's true. Out of every situation, whether it is a success or a failure, along the way, there are lots of experiences that you have that are positive and negative. But I think the thing that you dwell on is it, like the definitions we're talking about, it did not end up as it was supposed to. That is the failure, and you can't change it.
Sometimes I think we wallow too much. We blame ourselves
too much.
Wallowing? I think you wallow sometimes. I think you blame yourself too much because sometimes it's just the combination does not work. There is such a thing called chemistry, or there is something called destiny, and there is something called circumstances from the outside, or a relationship that ran its course.
I guess the question that I don't ask myself enough is, does it matter?
Yeah.
Does it? In the end, why am I wallowing, as you say?
Yeah.
If something fails, why is that a problem?
It's not exactly. It could be like, when they say when a door closes, another door opens, or something like that.
Well, in my case, when one door closes, the next one closes as well.
You've closed it forever.
Yeah, forever.
We can't do that.
Put the bolt on it. But it's interesting, isn't it, that do you think this is a cultural thing? Is this part of my stilted middle-class English grammar school, all-boys school education that's taught me that there is something slightly shameful in failure, or in something that I should be wallowing? I
don't think it's something that comes from the culture, because in our culture, in Western culture, I don't think it's a big problem to be in many relationships. We have many people, and we call them now, what do we call them? Serial monogamists. I think this is a thing at the moment, more now than ever. I think in our society, it's not that big a deal. You can just go in and out of relationships, and as long as you're faithful and you haven't cheated on anyone, I think people don't usually shame you. But I think
what about
Asian
the concept?
Countries,
what about the wider concept of failure, though? I'm bankrupt, or you become bankrupted, or you failed to keep your job. Those kind of failures. Do you think that? All of those have got stigma. Maybe not as much as they used to, but certainly. In
definitely.
my early childhood, all of those, you got divorced. I think we touched on it before, but the stigma associated with that kind of failure was really high.
Yeah. It was even higher in my culture where I come from. Like in Syria, if somebody was divorced, they should stay away from them. They will affect your name and good standing in society. The children of a divorced person would, their marriage chances would dwindle. And, so it's like, but I think even in Syria and even in the Middle East, it's not the same anymore. And people understand that you are better off alone than in a miserable relationship. And people understand that it's only one life you've got, and you can't waste it being unhappy just because you're worried about the stigma that might come with failing. So,
do you think your parents have a lot to do with shaping your attitudes towards failure?
Absolutely.
Because I think about, me wallowing, I can't help but feel that I've been influenced by the fact that, my parents were together forever, 50 plus years.
Wow.
And their big mantra was always, we've been through thick and thin together, and so getting divorced I felt a little bit of shame.
Yeah? Did your parents make you feel that way?
They did without realising it.
Okay.
They just by being in the room. I just, I really felt like I'd failed. I'd failed them.
Oh dear.
By not being able to keep my marriage together when, clearly during I remember in my childhood, they had plenty of moments where things were rocky and whatever, but they managed to see their way through it. So do you think, do you think parents shape how resilient you are towards failure?
Absolutely. I think that parents who teach their children to have a thicker skin and say, you know what, you failed, that's fine. I still love you. I think that's something that we sometimes do to our children is like when they fail, we make them feel so bad that they stop trying.
You're grounded.
Not just grounded, but also kind of like, oh, look at your brother, look at your sister. They managed to do things right.
Yeah.
And why are you like that? And even sometimes, like you said, they don't have to even say it. They just have to look at you a certain way and you feel that way.
Yeah.
I think that we should encourage children to make mistakes and to say, but also to help them distinguish between mistakes that are detrimental and mistakes that are very good. So, for example, when my children were little, and I would say to them once, don't touch that. That's a little hot. It's going to hurt. If I know they're not going to jump.
Let me tell you a true story about my mother. Don't touch that. It's hot. I went into my parents' lounge when I was about 4, and we had a gas fire.
Oh my God.
Which was burning. And I said to my mum, what happens if you put your finger in there? And she said, well, stick your finger in and find out. And I did. That's how I learned.
Well, I wasn't like that. But if they refuse to listen to me, then I'm like, okay, then you would like to see it for yourself. I guess that's the only way to learn. So I think if we are wise, we should listen to people's advice and try to learn from their mistakes and not fail. But sometimes we just want to learn and see it for ourselves. We should do that anyway.
I sort of think with parenting, I think parents are hugely influential. All the studies of trauma, whatever, talk about parental influence and inherited stress and anxiety and trauma.
Absolutely.
But I do think parenting has become incredibly difficult. Again, because of the polarization thing that we've talked about as well in the past, that you've got two different extremes of parenting, which I think both are equally as harmful. So you've got the helicopter parent who is trying to protect their child from exposure to absolutely anything.
Yeah.
So nothing is failure.
Yeah.
So it's okay. It's all right. Don't worry. Let's have a race and we'll all win.
We all get medals.
We're all going to get medals because that's great. And there's no losers in this
Yeah,
household. That kind of school of thought.
Yeah, yeah.
You're a winner,
Yeah.
even though that was terrible. That's great. Then you've got the other end of the where just there's no interest at all in the person's in the child and their failing. There are always students where the parents are just absent, so the child is
Left to their own devices, literally.
having to suffer the experience of failure on their own without parental support, either to help prop them up or to encourage them or to put the disciplines in place that they need in order to be successful. And that's equally detrimental. And what's needed is something in the middle. Because I do think children do have to learn that failure is part of normal life.
Yeah.
So that idea of there are no winners, everybody gets a medal, I have a problem with that, because I think it's good that children do learn that that's how life is, that somebody's going to get the job that you wanted. Somebody's going to get the partner that you wanted. You might just be number 3 on their list and get the bronze medal. So sometimes the hard home truths of it are sort of like really important. And then in other times, that's when we need the arm around our shoulders sort of supporting us through, through failure.
To be honest with you, I feel like no matter what you do as a parent, no matter what you do, how balanced, unbalanced, bad, neglectful, negligent, you are, your children are going to end up in the psychiatrist chaise longue, the chair, and they'll be like, my parents messed me up somehow. They loved me too much. They loved me too little. They disciplined me too much. They left me to my own devices. And it's like, either way, we're going to blame it on our parents. So I think we shouldn't
now, we could have a field
beat
day
ourselves
now.
up.
We could have a field day now, couldn't we? Because, I've done so much reading about trauma. And so much of the current literature, I can't even say that now, literature is not blaming, but is attributing your trauma to your parents and your early years and the influence that your parents have on you during those years and the inherited trauma from your parents. So your attitude to failure is because of the way that your parents... And I do feel a little bit like you just intimated there that parents are getting a bit of a hard rap for this. I mean, what are you supposed to do? You do your best, right? And who else is going to be the cause?
I think we've got to just keep the kids safe and fed and taken care of, loved, and just acknowledge that there are so many other influences on our children, their friends and their, I once read in a study, they said that the friends are a much bigger influence on the children than the parents. 100%, because that peer pressure is much more important than any other parental whatever it is, and so
that's so true, isn't it? About think about the students that we know in school. That one of the key factors in a student's success is who they decide to hang out with.
Absolutely.
Who the influences are. It doesn't matter what I say at the front of the classroom, but if they're working with the right person. That's going to help. Yeah,
in Arabic we have a saying, it's like, tell me who you befriend and I'll tell you who you are. And so they hang out with the right kids, they succeed, they hang out with the wrong bunch, and then they fail. But I think what we really need to do is to let the kids fail. I mean, I know there's a brilliant student that we once had. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And everything was so easy for this child. Never failed, never knew what failure meant. Always top of the class, worked fairly hard, but still was easy. Went to university, and then it was the biggest shock of their lives. They're kind of like, well,
I think
this is now failure, and it hits them a bit too late, and that's way too hard.
I think in my life, I don't recall any real failure as such in the early part of my life. I just seemed to breeze through it oblivious. Maybe it's because I was just so emotionally immature or whatever, but I didn't think about life as failure. I thought of it as opportunity. And if something didn't happen, that just meant there were other opportunities for me. So I was always positive about everything that happened, good
Will
or
be
bad.
okay, yeah.
And it's only in more recent
times.
years that failure has sort of crept up on me, because I'd never viewed myself as a failure, and then the sort of facts are there, and like you have to say, no, actually, I did screw up there, or I did fail. And that's hard if you've not prepared yourself, like you say, in your life.
Yeah.
I remember my parents preparing me for failure, apart from with a clip round the ear when they saw my school report. That was preparation. But no, I had no emotional tools to sort it out.
I think that was my problem as well, is that when I was younger, my mother helped me with everything. And I really breezed through school. And then my parents got divorced and I was left kind of, to fend for myself. I was really, really lucky to do well, but my grades dropped. Everything dropped because I was like, I really had no tools to take care of myself, to do well in school, because I was like, I never learned how to do it. I don't want to learn it now. And I can always scrape my way out of things. I never failed anything. I was fine. And that's also not very good. It didn't give me that kind of the tools, the tools to succeed. I actually learned how to be an industrious person only when I started working.
Yeah.
Then I was like, this is not going to work anymore. I have to start working really hard, because there are students who are relying on me. And if I don't finish things on time or in a timely fashion, at least, they will be very disappointed and let down. And they will come to me and say, you have failed us.
That again goes with this common theme about not being seen by other people as a failure. So what raised your levels of motivation or commitment to what you were doing?
To be honest,
was what the impact on other people, as opposed to your own self-worth or self-pride?
I think for me it was kind of like this responsibility. I think that was how I measured myself as a success or a failure. Did I fulfill my responsibilities, and did I do what I was paid to do? This is something also we have in the Middle East or in Islam. It's like, if you have to basically, I don't know how to explain it, but you have to earn your money. And if you are not working hard, if you are pretending to be working and earning that money, you are guaranteed to spend it on your health. So this is kind of like, if you don't earn that money, if it's money that you take by not working hard enough, then you are going to either lose it, somebody's going to steal it, or you're going to spend it on your health.
Yeah.
And that's really scary to me. So I made sure that I did not fail those who depended on me, I think.
I was going to say, have you got a good poem or something?
I found
something literary for us to look at.
Really, really interesting, because one of my favorite poets is Khalil Gobran.
Yeah. And
I found something written by him called Defeat, and it's really interesting how he sees it. It's kind of like, it's almost like he rejects success. But he had a very interesting life, Gobran. He died at 48, I think. He died really young, never married. He was a painter. Apparently he painted some really, really famous people. Jung was one of them.
Okay.
Carl Jung. And so his view on failure is really interesting. So here it goes. It's called Defeat by Khalil Gobran. Defeat, my solitude and my aloofness. You are dearer to me than 1,000 triumphs, and sweeter to my heart than all world glory. Defeat, my self-knowledge and my defiance. Through you, I know that I am yet young and swift of foot, and not to be trapped by withering laurels. And in you, I have found aloneness, and the joy of being shunned and scorned. Defeat, my shining sword and shield. In your eyes, I have read that to be enthroned is to be enslaved, and to be understood is to be leveled down. And to be grasped is but to reach one's fullness, and like a ripe fruit to fall and be consumed. Defeat, my bold companion. You shall hear my songs and my cries and my silences, and none but you shall speak to me of the beating of wings, and urging of seas, and of mountains that burn in the night. And you alone shall climb my steep and rocky soul. Defeat, my deathless courage. You and I shall laugh together with the storm, and together we shall dig graves for all that die in us, and we shall stand in the sun with a will, and we shall be dangerous.
That's a really nice poem. And I'm very surprised. It's not what I expected him to write based on the other things you've shared with me by Khalil. I love that stanza that says, "Through you I know that I am yet young and swift of foot, and not to be trapped by withering laurels. And in you I found aloneness and the joy of being shunned and scorned." I've never heard somebody describe being shunned and scorned as joyful.
I know. I was really surprised to find this.
What's he talking about?
I feel that, well, I don't know. If you look at this line when he says that to be enthroned is to be enslaved, I think sometimes people worry that if they succeed, then they kind of like there is so much asked of them, or they are put in a certain box, and then they can no longer find their way out of it, or fail, or make mistakes. When you're at the top, they say it's very lonely at the top. And also when he's saying that I'm swift of foot, it's just, I don't know. It's really, really interesting how he sees it as a kind of, what does he say? My bold companion. It's like, because of course we have to be really, really brave to fail, don't we? You shall hear my songs and my cries and my silences, and none but you shall speak to me of the beating of wings and the urging of the seas and its slips. I don't know. I find it stunningly beautiful in the imagery that he uses, but it's really interesting how it's not about...
You would have expected the poem to be the other way round, talking about, rather than defeat and failure, rather sort of success.
Glorifying himself.
But I think what I love about it, to put it in the context of something more rock and roll, this is a bit like the band. You know, when there's a band, a successful new band always have the difficult third album.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That you rise up quickly and you produce your first album and people start to love you. The second one, you know, that's it. You are flavour of the month. And then you're enthroned. You're to be enthroned is to be enslaved.
Yes.
That's it. You have no room to make more mistakes, to be ultra creative, to do things different, because people now have an image of you based on the success that you've just had, rather than all the various other things that you could do going forward. And
you know who this reminds me of? It reminds me of Avicii. I don't know if you know Avicii.
I do. I love Avicii.
He was a really, really great musician, and I love some of his songs. You might know, like.
But quite a
What's
sad...
your favourite? Do you know any? Which one of his songs do you remember now?
I wish I could give you the title, but there was a northern group from Manchester called Cherry Ghost, and the lead singer of that did the vocals on it, and the name I can't remember.
Is it Waiting for Love?
Yes.
Is it?
Yes.
That's my favourite song by Avicii.
Well, there you go. Very good.
And whoever has not watched that video that goes with the song, you should really go and watch that video. It's really, really sad and really nice. And
just
really...
a plug for anybody who hasn't listened to Cherry Ghost. Awesome band. But anyway,
I've never heard of them.
There you go.
But Avicii, I remember very distinctly when I discovered that he actually killed himself. I was in Stuttgart for a conference.
Why did he? What was the story? I knew that he killed himself, but
I think the problem was that apparently he rose to fame, or he found his first success when he was 16.
Wow.
He started becoming really famous and posting things online, and he got like a record deal, and then he became really, really rich and really successful really, really quickly. And then I read an article that said he once said that I realized I didn't need any of that money. I did not need money, and now I have all of this money. So he started donating it, which is really cool. But at the same time, he developed depression and addiction problems. And I really think the problem with rising to fame and success without any failures is that it leaves you really first of all, really dizzy. You know, you don't know who you are and what you're doing in this world, and it kind of disconnects you from reality and how other teenagers your age might be living. At the same time, it's kind of like there's no sweetness in getting something without much failure or hard work or something when it comes to you so easily. I'm not saying that he didn't work hard on his songs. I'm sure he did, because they're brilliant. They're really brilliant. But to find success at such a young age might leave you feeling really disconnected and alone.
I often wonder, like, it's the same with footballers who at the age of 16 or 17 are multimillionaires and they have everything they need, and yet they've never... So what happens to them when they get rejected or injured at age 23, and that's the end of their career? How do they cope with that sort of failure? A little bit like Avicii, there's a Netflix documentary that I'm sadly been watching about Robbie Williams.
I love Robbie Williams.
But this is also quite a similar sort of thing that, you know, a massive stardom at age of 16. He was 16 when he was in Take That, as a you know, and then he leaves the band, and he has to, for the first time, try and cope with being on his own. Yeah. So he slips into boozing and drugs and such like. Yeah. Very similar story to Avicii. I think that's the only way to cope with failure. Or at least a sense of failure, because he'd never had to deal with
it before.
He went from nowhere to ultra stardom virtually overnight.
Goodness, I'm so glad that he didn't face the same fate as Avicii.
But based on the story, I mean, I don't think he was that far away.
Really?
And I think addiction in a lot of sort of celebrities, etc., maybe even that's sort of a way of quelling the fear of failure. You know, you're so used to the buzz and the high of your success that in the downtime that you have a lot of time to think about the counter. And
you become really anxious, and you become really afraid of losing it. Yeah. You know, it's like, oh, and do these people want to befriend me because of my money? Yeah. And do they like me only because I'm talented and not because of who I am? Yeah. And so, and that's a form of failure, isn't it? If you don't know how to handle it's like a lottery winner who loses the money within 3 years. You know, it's the same thing. It's like you're failing to celebrate your success or to understand the nature of your success. Yeah. And that's something we find anyway. It's really, really sad, and I'm so glad that Robbie Williams actually found a family, and now he has a child or children, and he seems in a better place.
He seems, but very, very, very introspective in terms of looking at him. This program has him looking at old video clips of himself. It must be extremely painful. Yeah. So him sort of ruminating on his past and how he sees himself now through his glasses of a 50-year-old. Wow. That's quite an interesting sort of
but really useful
setup.
I think we should all do that and be reflective and go and look at our past successes and failures. Business teacher.
Yeah, I try to be.
What are some businesses that you can think of that maybe... How about, let's start the other way around. Let's start off businesses that were successful and then failed.
Okay. Well, this is quite an interesting topic because we talk a lot about business failure. Because for every major success, for every Apple, there's going to be 1,000 companies that were competing with Apple that fell and failed. Yeah. And interestingly, based on our discussion, we don't have the same sort of emotional response to that. So Apple was the winner and everybody else failed. Okay, so it doesn't matter the fact that people
that's
lost
business. It happens.
They lost a lot of money. People lost their jobs, their livelihoods, their creativity, their idea. But we don't have the same emotional response to.
But Avicii killed himself.
I failed in my marriage. So some good examples. The textbook example is Kodak, of course.
Okay.
So leader in the photographic industry for 100 years. Market share of over 90% in terms of camera film. Amazing. But their failure to adapt to the shift towards digital photography, almost refusing to acknowledge that this was a thing. And they just stuck with the old. So it led to their decline, and they went bankrupt in 2012.
That's really sad, isn't it?
I mean, for such a massive brand name, but their failure to manage the world of change.
Yeah.
Classic example.
You've got to adapt.
Of failure. And maybe there's a lesson to be learned there for humans, right?
Yeah.
Your failure to adapt to the world around you is bound to cause you a failure at some stage.
Yeah.
Who else? Yahoo?
Yeah.
Yahoo it was massive in the late 90s.
They were everything, everywhere.
They were supposed to buy Google for $1 million in 1998.
Okay.
But they refused to buy them for $1 million. That's what Google would be willing to sell to Yahoo for $1 million. 4 years later, they went back and said, actually, we made a mistake in 1988. We'll buy you for $3 billion.
From 1 million to 3 billion.
Yeah, 3 billion 4 years later. But even then, Google said, no,
Good.
5 billion. Yahoo refused for the second time.
Yeah, they went cheap, huh?
Yeah, but 5 billion is only 0.5% of what is currently valued today. So if they'd have spent 5 billion in, whenever that was, 2002, they would have been in the money. They were supposed to buy Facebook for 1.1 billion. Yeah, Facebook was struggling, only had 20 million in revenue at the time. So the Yahoo CEO decided 1.1 billion is too much. I'm just going to offer 800 million. Facebook backed out of the deal. And then, on the other side of the coin, 2008, Microsoft made a bid for Yahoo for $44.6 billion. And Yahoo turned them down.
Oh, God.
Then, by 2016, Yahoo had been bought for just 4.6 billion.
No.
So if you look at the decision making, the failures in senior executive decision making, then Yahoo is your textbook example.
That's a shame. It's just a series. I'm sure they made some good decisions along the way, but these seem really gigantic.
But you know what? I think there's a human equivalent of that.
Yeah?
Do you not think that some people have an idea that they are far better than they really are?
Yeah.
Or they believe that they achieve far more than they really have. Or that they are more worthy than they really are. And I think Yahoo were the business equivalent of that.
Yeah, an inflated sense of self.
And I think human beings with that inflated sense are blind to their poor judgment and poor decision making, and they end up with failures that they then refuse to acknowledge that are failures.
Yep.
Because, I mean, every step along the way, Yahoo should have...
So they should have learned from their past
mistakes, you know, but they didn't. So, yeah, it's interesting. Both Kodak and Yahoo, you could translate those into human stories too.
I found something that is actually the opposite of what you're saying. So you're talking about people who were at the pinnacle and then fell. I found people who were quote unquote failures and then found a way out of it and actually were better off.
Yeah.
So I don't know, have you heard of Arianna Huffington?
Yes, as in the Huffington Post.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that, but apparently she ran for some kind of office, mayor or something like that for some city, and then she got only 1% of the votes.
Oh, dear.
She failed miserably.
Yeah.
And then she decided that she wanted to start the Huffington Post, and she did really, really well with that. And I would say maybe she was better off with the Huffington Post than being a politician. So there were a few people that were mentioned that I found, like Arianna Huffington, Thomas Edison. Of course, everybody knows about Thomas Edison and how he was a failure, and his mother was the one who actually did her best to get him through, and then in the end he has, I don't know how many patents, hundreds.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs, Bill Gates had I'd never heard of this thing about, what is it called? Something about the roads where he was measuring traffic and selling it to the government, the information.
Yeah, trafo
Data, and that failed miserably. Of course, the classic.
And Steve Jobs at Google was fired by Google.
Yes, by Google or by Apple?
Steve Jobs was fired by Apple.
Yeah.
The company that he built. And then he went back.
Yeah.
So these are figures that we would never consider to be failures.
Yeah. Yeah, because they knew how to get back up, that's the interesting thing. But my favorite, and this is from, I found this article, it's called Success After Failure or something by Sean Peake.
Yeah.
And the one bit that I loved, it's about Walt Disney.
Okay, yeah.
So it says, if you focus on Walt Disney's failures, it's amazing that the Walt Disney Company ever reached the level of success it enjoys today. Disney was at one point living on dog food and unable to pay his rent. Then, during a contract dispute with Universal Pictures, he lost creative control of his first character, Oswald the Rabbit. Next, MGM rejected his Mickey Mouse character.
Bet they're kicking themselves, yeah.
Because the studio believed women are afraid of mice. Before the screening of Pinocchio, this is the funny bit. Before the screening of Pinocchio, Disney hired several little people to stand on top of the marquee, dressed as puppets, to wave at the families coming into the theater. He provided them with wine and food for the day. Mm-hmm. By the time the screening began, the little people were drunk, naked, and swearing at the crowd.
Yeah.
Disney overcame these failures and turned Disney into a global empire. So it's just...
I've just got an image in my mind of these sort of
people
sitting on the top of a tent,
drunk.
naked and drunk, claiming to be from Walt Disney. There's lots of other examples. J.K. Rowling.
Yeah, I think...
amazing. Had really hit hard times, unemployed, turned down by all 12 publishers. That she submitted the first scripts to.
Do you know what I really like about J.K. Rowling? Also, when I was... doing a bit of reading about her. Somebody asked her, why don't you go live somewhere where they won't tax you so much? She said, no, I'm happy to pay tax into the system that took care of me when I was on benefits.
Yeah.
I find that fantastic.
I like that, because you would like to think that if you've been successful and you've failed, if you've seen both sides of the coin and you've known what it's like to have to live, with very little money, very few resources, very little support, you then find success. Maybe you're more reflective about what you should be doing with your money. I'd like to think that that's true.
Yeah, no, totally. I think it really makes you very empathetic towards other people who struggle.
Yeah.
So if you look at other really rich people who were born rich, and then they continue to be rich, they really don't understand what it is to struggle, and they don't know how to empathize.
Because they've never had that financial failure.
Exactly.
Failures for them are,
my daddy wasn't here to put
not
me...
Not winning at the golf club or whatever it is. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's almost like you are really socialised. You are really... your character is really formed by your experiences of failure. But the type of failure is so important, isn't it? Because if as you say, you've lived in a very privileged world, and your failures are all of a... really not that significant.
First world problems.
I failed to find a dress for the ball. As opposed to, my business failed and I was living in a garage.
Yeah.
Or, really life-changing failure must have a massive impact on you.
Can I tell you another story? Actually, Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah.
He was struggling so much as an actor, and he had to sell his dog.
Yeah.
And
that's the ultimate.
That's really sad. He had to sell his dog. I think he had nothing, like no one but the dog. And then the next day or something, he sold the manuscript to Rocky. Oh. And then he went and bought the dog again for $2,000 or $3,000.
That's cute. Do you know what my parents' dog was called?
What?
Rocky. There you go.
There we go.
Ka-ching. Michael Jordan, basketball legend. I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I think we have to acknowledge that. We have to get up again after we fail. Otherwise, I think sometimes you're so close to winning, but you give up and you end up not knowing what it feels like to win.
Do you think that there's a role to play in that mentality when it comes to education and the way we bring children up, back to the parenting thing? Because I think certainly in terms of my educational philosophy, and you probably heard of it as well, because I think it's a school thing anyway, this idea about growth mindsets. So growth mindsets out of Stanford University, Caroline Dweck coined the phrase growth mindsets, but basically in linking it to what we've been talking about failure, it's absolutely critical in the ability for children to learn, that they understand the importance of making mistakes and failing. And the brain research carried out by, so there's working with Caroline Dweck of interest to me is somebody called Joe Bowler. Joe Bowler was the person working on maths and growth mindsets. And they did some experiments on brain response, etc., and found that the brain was, I'm not very good at explaining it, but when a student made a mistake, the brain was processing something like 50 times more actively than when they got something right.
Okay.
And that makes so much sense to me when I view my students. Of course, you have to have the right combination of things here, but so a student who is really actively engaged in the learning process and is viewing the learning process positively, and who makes a mistake while doing that, learns so much more from that experience of making the mistake, and unwrapping it, untying it, and whatever to understand it, than those students who just cruise by and get everything right. They're not really developing their skills.
You know what this reminds me of? I had a student just recently submit something that was perfect, and actually, I gave it to you to run it through your detector, the AI detector.
Yeah.
And sure enough, it was not written by the student. So I had to go back to the student, and I didn't want to make it a problem or yell at him, but I was like, if you give me something that is perfect and I find no mistakes there, I don't give you any feedback, how are you going to learn? Because in the exam, there is no access to ChatGPT or anything like that. Yeah. So if you don't make mistakes, you are not going to grow, because I'm not going to be able to give you feedback. And then how did this help anyone? But going back to your education thing, I think that we have to be really careful with the type of student we're talking about, because there are some students like me who need praise to be able to continue going, because I can be very easily demotivated. I know myself. I'm not the kind of person who is like, you shoot me, like Sia said, you shoot me down and I'll rise up. I'm not that kind of person. I'm the kind of person who's like, if enough people will tell me that I'm bad at something, I will stop, And so
I don't think the two have to be mutually exclusive.
It has to be a bit of both, exactly.
And I think the very fact that we polarize success and failure, as opposed to just seeing them as together as learning.
Yeah.
Learning is both, isn't it?
Yes.
You can write an essay in your subject, which has got some really successful bits and some less successful bits in the same way as in maths. You can tackle one part of the problem really well and another not so well. That's just learning, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think you have to
this
bring...
kind of... In the growth mindset thing, there is, again, another continuum. Not success and failure, but growth mindset and fixed mindset.
Yeah.
So those with a fixed mindset believe that the skills and abilities that they've got are fixed. They're innate.
Yes.
You're born smart, you're born talented. Individuals who've got this fixed mindset then view failure as inevitable. as permanent. So they are going to pursue easier tasks or not do the task at all, like you said, because that's a better option than the failure that they believe is inevitable.
Yeah.
Whereas those who've got a growth mindset, it's all about developing skills through practice and effort. Everybody is capable. Everybody can do it. Failure is a chance to learn. Challenges are embraced as a way of being creative and problem solving. And wouldn't it be great for all of our students? All of our students have that kind of growth mindset.
Yeah, and this is what we try to instill in them. And I think this is something that also science backed actually came up with only very recently, I don't know, 10 years ago or something, this neuroplasticity of the mind and how it's really not fixed. And we keep, it's like a muscle. You just keep exercising it and it keeps growing, or you just let it go and it fails you because you never really stretched it. But it's interesting when you talk about failure. Sometimes I notice in our Asian students, more than the Western students, this image, the self-image, they don't want to lose face. And this is the phrase is that. And that's why I once had a Japanese student tell me, she said, it took me a long time to actually be able to say my opinion in class, especially if it was to oppose me as the teacher, because I always encourage them. It's like, this is my opinion, but please, if I'm wrong, or if you want to add something, let me know. I would like to, we learn from each other. And then she said it took her a long time to be able to even say something. She was an observer for a long time, because she said, you don't make mistakes, and you don't oppose the teacher, but that's something else. And I found that very, very interesting. It's and that might be one of the reasons why suicide rate might be really high in Japan, or Korea, where it's you've made a mistake, especially if it's a big one. You lost your business, you failed your family, you kill yourself.
Yeah. It's easier than facing the consequences.
Exactly. Or the looks and the pity in people's eyes. And that's really, really sad. I think I wish they would also learn a little bit more about, just make mistakes and fail. Yeah.
No, you're right. And especially if the parental, you think about some of those students where the parental pressure to succeed is so high that there can't be any joy. I think the good thing about growth mindsets is trying to promote a real positivity and enthusiasm towards learning, bring the joy back into learning.
And they can be brilliant. I mean, these students are brilliant, especially about maths and things like that. They're hardworking. They'll.
But I'm not sure that the joy is always there.
Yeah.
And maybe their motivation to succeed is their fear of failure.
Yeah.
Because of parental pressure, cultural tradition.
Cultural tradition, exactly. Had a really nice poem that I saw a glimpse of. Do you want to read it to us?
I found this. I always do a little trawl to see what I can find on the subject matter. And I found failure was not an easy one.
Yeah.
There weren't that many poets writing about failure.
I agree.
Even the Bible came up fairly short, or Shakespeare, there wasn't a great deal.
I know. I tried to find something from the Quran, actually. I couldn't really find anything substantial. I mean, there were things here and there, but nothing really strong. Yeah. Interesting.
Can I give you the Bible one first?
Go on.
I've got 3 Bible quotes. The best one I'll leave till last.
Okay.
The Bible quotes sound a bit like my mother and her attitude towards failure. Proverbs 24:16. Although the righteous fall 7 times, they rise again, but the wicked stumble when calamity strikes. The wicked stumble. So if you get it, my mom's philosophy, you get yourself back up, brush your knees down, and carry on.
Yeah.
That's what it says in Proverbs 24:16, basically. Jeremiah says this to the people of Judah. This is what the Lord says. If a man falls down, he gets up again. This is like that song by Chumbawamba. I get up and get on again. Okay, never mind.
Go on.
Strange now, it's a drinking song, but it's not really. If a man falls down, he gets up again. And if a man goes the wrong way, he turns around and comes back. So the Bible is really, it's all about being resilient, isn't it? It's not about facing your... well, it is about facing your failure, but in a determined way.
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah, I'm not sure that...
Do you think it doesn't leave room for vulnerability? Is that what you're saying?
I think, we talked a little bit about how the experience of failure can lead to personal growth by better understanding your emotional response to it, by understanding the reasons for the failure. You maybe go through this transcendental light bulb moment, and that really develops you as a person.
Yeah.
I don't think the Bible's giving any room for that.
I'll tell you what the problem is. Yes, it's not saying that you should reflect. Reflection is really, really important when you fail, because you have to sit down and say, so where did I go wrong? Where did this other person go wrong? What tools do I need to have? Does it matter? I mean, usually it matters, because there will be no progress if we don't think that it matters. Some failures don't matter, but most of them do, especially if they involve other human beings.
But not enough to completely
destroy yourself.
The rest of your life.
Well, it depends on how,
Yeah. So here's the best one, Proverbs 26:11. I think I might have this as a tattoo.
Okay.
Like a dog that returns to its vomit, a fool does the same foolish things again and again.
Lovely.
So this is, but I quite like what that sort of means. This is back to this point about failure is potentially a positive thing. Because if we do fail, I guess the story says if you fail and you keep doing what you're doing, you're just going to fail again. You're going to return to your vomit.
Lovely.
But if you do reflect on your failure and you do try and change the way things happen in your life, then you won't necessarily have to repeat or return to your vomit.
But that's what Einstein once said. I don't remember it word for word, but he said that if you're looking at the same problem with the same way, how are you going to come to a different outcome? Yeah,
and that's definitely true, isn't it? The secret of life is to fall 7 times and to get up 8 times.
Yes.
Paulo Coelho.
I like Paulo Coelho. Actually, I like one of his books. I don't know all of his books, but I really do like The Alchemist.
This picking yourself back up, it seems to be, Michelle Obama. I love that lady. Failure is a part of the process. You just learn to pick yourself back up.
Absolutely.
Confucius. Our greatest glory is not in never failing, but in rising every time we fail. Yeah.
I think it depends also on the definition of rising every time you fail. Is it rising by getting up and trying again? Or is it rising by not wallowing and criticizing yourself and others and, just blaming everyone? So I think rising is a very good word. I really like it.
Yeah. The difference between average people and achieving people is their perception of and response to failure. John C. Maxwell. Yes, there's some nice quotes, but they're all very much about resilience, aren't they? Yes.
And that's something we need to build in our kids for sure. This is what we try to build in people. I think build resilience in them, make sure that they don't identify with the mistake or with the failure and know that they are not that mistake. They've made a mistake. They're not a mistake. I think that's the most important thing. And also the way we deal with them. It's like, you've made a mistake. We move on. I'm not going to keep reminding you of it all the time. So I think resilience is definitely something that we need to build in them and say, okay, you've scraped your knee, put a plaster on it, and get up. I'm
interested though. So do you see mistake and failure as synonymous?
No. I mean, sometimes they can be. You fail to do the right thing when you make a mistake, right? But failure in our understanding of it today has a bigger meaning. It's like failure is a big thing. But a mistake is actually a small failure.
See, I can handle the idea of making mistakes because, everybody makes mistakes. We're only human. You can't do everything right all the time. Yeah. Failure just sounds worse Failure seems to me more permanent.
Yes, exactly. It's an end thing. It's like, a mistake is it's like you have a pencil.
Work in progress.
Yeah,
rub
and
it out.
you can just erase
again.
it and write again. But if you're a failure, it seems permanent. It seems like that's the end of it.
You're doing a painting, you make a few mistakes along the way, and at the end it's a failure.
Yeah.
The failure sounds worse than the mistakes. Yeah, but I guess they're intertwined, aren't they?
So read that poem to us, please.
Oh, sorry, yes. Let me tell you about the poet a bit. I don't know very much about him. But this guy, I said that I looked and I couldn't find very much. Apart from, there were quite a lot of poems all about failure by this American poet, 19th century poet called Amos Russel Wells.
Oh, so he's a specialist.
He was like a poet that I mentioned on a previous episode. Who he didn't just write poems. It seemed like he was a preacher, sold pharmaceuticals, did all sorts of things. But one of the things was he also wrote loads of stuff.
Okay.
So his poem is called Failure. Failure is a rocky hill. Climb it with a will. Failure is a broken bone. Set it, grin, and do not groan. Failure is a tangled string. Puzzle out the knotted thing. Failure is a river swift. Swim it, swim, and do not drift. Failure is a black morass. Cross it, there are tufts of grass. Failure is a treacherous pit. Scramble, clamber out of it. Failure is an inky night. Sing, expect the morning light. Failure is an ugly coal. Fuse it to a diamond soul.
Really cool. I like the contrast between this.
It's a bit cheesy.
It is cheesy, yeah.
But
it's satisfying, I think, is what it is. It's very tidy.
It's tidy. I also quite like that the failure was likened to a number of different conundrums or problems. And I think that is a true reflection of failure is so multifaceted.
Absolutely.
Failure can have there's so many different causes of failure, feelings of failure, manifestations of failure. It can be a rocky hill, a broken bone, or a tangled string.
Do you know what I think the most important thing with failure is to be able to be vulnerable and admit that you've made a failure and just move on. You know, most of the time people don't really care that much. They'll maybe talk about it for a bit and then move on. But I think people will not learn if they don't see people they respect failing. You know, like our children and our students, if they don't see us failing and owning up to it. Like I've heard my students complain about teachers who, when they make mistakes, they just like, no, I was right. And they try to prove it, you know. No, just say, I am human and I have made a mistake. And yes, it was a minor failure and then we can all move from here.
I like my students to
point out,
to see that I've made a mistake.
Because that means they're alert.
And it shows that I'm human.
Yes.
You know?
So I think it's very important that we are open about our failures and not just... I remember my aunt used to have this kind of thing, very similar to the English stiff upper lip, where it's like, if a snake tries to bite you or something, you bite it off and you keep the poison in your mouth, you don't show it to anyone, and then when nobody's looking, you spit it out. And I'm like,
wow,
that sounds really, really tough. It's like, why not say, I was almost bitten by a snake and something happened and exactly moral support right now. Something happened, but no.
So, what has the experience of? I mean, I can't imagine you've had many failures in your life, but let's assume that you've had a few. How has the experience of failure, do you think, shaped you as a person or shaped your outlook on life?
I think my earliest failure was that my dad, who was very, very, very academic, he had a PhD in engineering and he expected so much of me. I did everything to evade his authority and make sure that I did not do what he wanted me to do because he was forcing me to do it. And I'm like, if I had used that intelligence to do what he wanted me to do, I would be in a different place right now. You know, I'm very happy about where I am. I am happy being here, and I'm happy. I mean, everything that happened in my life has led me to be here with you, having this podcast, teaching these lovely people, interacting with our lovely colleagues. I'm very happy with where I am. But maybe if I had let myself just not rebel and work a little bit harder. I mean, mind you, I was a teenager, so.
But do you see that as failure?
I think I failed my dad for sure. I think he...
Gosh.
Yeah, definitely failed him. But I also kind of failed myself because I didn't, as we always say to the students, didn't fulfill my potential. You know, like I had potential, but I really scraped by at school. I really made it just because I paid attention in class, but I did nothing at home. And that was really not good. That was definitely a failure. But I was a teenager. I can't really blame myself for that. And as I said, I developed a very different work ethic later. Another failure that is not really a failure is also my divorce, you know, because I chose a person that I knew deep down was not the right person for me. He was a good man and I'm a good person, but we were just not a good match, and people tried to tell me, and I just didn't listen because I was like, no, so I need to... That was
a failure of
judgment. Yeah. And also going through with something, staying too long, that was also a failure. I should not have stayed that long in that marriage. Otherwise, a bunch of mistakes here and there that, you know, we can all dust off and move on. I wouldn't call them failures. I would just call them...
the most interesting bit out of that is that you carry the weight of having or feeling that you failed your father.
Yeah, I was definitely... I mean, that's how he made me feel for sure. He was always walking around going like...
So it's like
Rama is like the prodigal son.
It's a double whammy failure then, isn't it?
It was horrible. It was really, really interesting. But it shaped me, you know. I became very, very resilient. He also made me resilient consciously, not just by pointing me out as a failure, but also kind of like... it's like, you can do this, you know, just, I trust you. You can do things and the hard things. And I was the firstborn, so I was expected to do a lot and know a lot. And then I ended up being a really strong person. So, it's okay. He's gone now, but I hope that actually it doesn't matter what he thinks of me anymore. I know that I'm not a failure.
No, and that experience has helped to shape you.
Absolutely.
So
gave me empathy, that's for sure. I know exactly. I try my hardest to be very careful with my words and what I expect of people. That's for sure. How about you?
Well, I think my answer to the question is quite different now than if you'd asked me, say, 10 years ago. And I think probably is kind of in line with the Stoic tradition. I think if I mixed Stoicism with even more sort of pessimistic thing, one part of me wants to view life as just a series of failures.
Oh, dear me.
A series of failures and misjudgments that are strung together, and the in-between bits are just trying my best, which is quite negative. But if you look at it more positively, it is consistent with Stoicism in that Stoicism is all about, you know, how you face the consequences or face what's in front of you.
And learn from what happened.
And learn from what happened. And I think failure as well as success is a key part of that. And also Stoicism reflects the fact that what you have to react to isn't all of your making. You're reacting to what other people are doing or saying. And I think often your perception of failure is not about you at all.
Yes.
It's about other people's reaction to you, and that's about them. So I think that's probably my perspective on it now is I'm not surprised and worried by failure. It's just a fact of life. Whereas maybe 10, 15 years ago, failure, I just was not prepared for failure.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, it took one perfect storm to realise, oh, you are human after all.
Yes.
And failure does happen to you.
Yeah.
And maybe you're not the guy that you thought you were. Maybe you have to.
No, maybe you're not a god. You're expecting yourself to be a god of some sort, like that. You're infallible, but
you're
nobody
trying to be
is.
superhuman and
Yes.
super infallible. You be there for everybody and do everything that everybody expects.
Yeah.
You're bound to crash.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
I'm glad that I crashed then rather than when I was, 16 or 19 or the Avicii story.
Yeah.
That is so sad.
Yeah, you had some wisdom under your belt that made you, able to go through it and survive it.
Yeah. Very good.
Okay, then. I think
Have we been successful or did we fail in our brief today?
I think we have been fairly successful. There has been, I don't know, for me, there were many things that I wanted to share. I'm sure you too. But I think this is becoming way too long and we don't want to bore anybody to death. So
we don't want
then
to.
we would have failed.
Yes.
So
I think that's a good time to close. Have we got anything to read to finish off?
no, I was thinking about the Nietzsche.
A bit of Nietzsche to finish. Give us some words of wisdom to think about.
I really like Nietzsche's. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah. And if you must perish, then do so immediately and suddenly. For in that case, you will perhaps leave proud ruins behind you, and not, as is now to be feared, merely molehills covered with grass and weeds. Fail greatly.
Fail greatly.
Because you've tried greatly instead of just trying, shyly. So
I am going to leave proud ruins behind me, I promise. Terrific. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed that.
I did too. Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. And I hope that our listeners liked it too.
Yeah.
And we will see you
Soon.
next week.
Yeah, we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
We hope that you've enjoyed listening to the readings we chose for you today.
And that our musings have ignited your thoughts.
If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and those you think would enjoy it.
If you have any thoughts, suggestions, or any kind of feedback, please send us an email using the email in the show notes.
We'd love to hear from you with the words that make you.